Hi guys and girls, welcome back to Xenus Minis. My name is Greg and today we're going to start a bit of a journey. And this journey, I assure you, will literally have everything. It's going to have painting tutorials, it's going to have mold line removal, it's going to have a drill for ants, and it's going to have that one thing that every hobbyist needs, an odour-free stripper. Who doesn't want that? Much like the show Naked Attraction, we are starting where any good date ends, and of course, what that means is preparing for a new hobby project. If you're not aware of what Naked Attraction is, take it from me. It is the best that UK TV has to offer. Honestly, it is something special. But moving swiftly on from that, whether you're a newcomer or you're a veteran, just looking for some hints and tips, we've got you covered here at Xenus Minis. This is the first in a series of videos that'll go through the preparing, the building, and the painting of a model right from start through to finish. And what makes it even better is that you guys get to pick the model. In the description below, there's going to be a good range of models to choose from. All you have to do is leave a comment, let me know which model you want me to paint, and that's the one we will build and paint together throughout this series. So really looking forward to seeing what you guys choose. But for today we're talking about the fundamentals. So they are the tools of the trade, or at least the things that I use on a fairly regular basis. So these could be the daily things, from your brushes to your glue, to the more specialised things like that little drill we spoke about to drill out your gun barrels, or maybe some sculpting tools to use with green stuff. So today we're going to be pulling together a bit of an overview of all these tools to hopefully lay the foundations from the series moving forward. So I'm going to stop talking here, I'm going to start talking somewhere else, and I'll see you in a moment. Welcome back, guys, and in front of us is a very surgical looking setup of what at least I would consider to be the tools of my trade when it comes to the hobby. So as mentioned in the intro video, these are things that I use on a fairly regular basis. So we're just going to start off with getting a bit of an overview of what each of these components are, and then we're going to come back in a little bit more detail to discuss what I use them for. So from left to right, we have some brush cleaner. We have an assortment of brushes, a box of paper clips, an old toothbrush, some Blu-Tac, reverse tweezers, pair of clippers, small hand drill, some green stuff, mold line remover, a scalpel and replacement blades, plastic glue, super glue, some metal sculpting tools, silicone sculpting tools, and some fine grade sandpaper. And something that couldn't actually fit on the tray is this. And this is BioStrip 20. So you probably guess what that's used for, but I do want to talk about this at some point during the video, so we'll come back to that. So let's get started and look at the brush cleaner. So this is the Master's brush cleaner, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to keep your brushes nice and clean. It's one of those things I really wish I knew when I started out with the hobby. Not only would it saved me an absolute fortune every time I had to replace a brush, but it also meant that my painting would be more consistent over time. So if you've got a brush that gets damaged or clogged up with paint, your painting is naturally going to suffer. So you don't have to use this stuff, you can use just regular soap and water, but as I say, can't stress enough how important it is to keep those brushes clean if you want to improve as a painter and if you want consistent results as well. So this stuff is really easy to use. You literally just wet your brush, rub it around inside, and rinse it off. So as I say, you just get your damp brush, rub it around in there, and then rinse it off, and it takes off any of the excess build-up of paint that's gathered on the brush, and just keeps it really nice and clean. So very simple product, doesn't cost that much either. You can find it on eBay for fairly cheap, but really worth investing in and getting a pot of this. So what is the best brush? Probably an unanswerable question, but it's certainly a popular one within the community, especially with you guys who have just started painting. You want to know what you should be spending your money on. Do you want to invest in the expensive ones? Do you need to just pick up the cheap ones? What about this brand? Or your favourite painter is using these brushes and he's endorsing them and they cost hundreds of pounds, so you must buy them. You probably don't need to. You can get away, and I say get away, you can achieve great results using cheap brushes. Go to your local hobby or craft store, if you're in the UK, the likes of the Range or the Works, and just pick up a set of cheap brushes ranging in size. They're not going to set you back a lot of money, and you can still achieve some great results. Remember, it's the person behind the brush more so than the brush itself in a lot of cases. But if you do want to spend a little bit of extra money on, say, a Kolinsky Sable brush, and you do look after it, it will look after you. They are of superior quality to the cheaper ones, and they will last you longer. The tips and the bristles are of Kolinsky Sable, obviously, and they are a better quality, and the build of the brush itself is better. But you have to clean them, you have to look after them. Before I knew any better, I was going through a £7 to £10 brush every couple of months because I didn't look after it. But these brushes can literally last you years. So if you do want to invest, just look after the brushes and they will last you a very long time. Again, you don't have to spend a lot of money on a huge range of brushes. I've got 5 in front of me here, and these are pretty much all I use. So don't think you need to go out and get a specialist brush for this, that and everything. You don't need to. So what I'm going to do is just run through what I've got here, what I use it for. So first one on the left is a medium dry brush from Citadel. You don't need to spend money on a dry brush. You can use an old, abused brush. Any brush can be a dry brush. But I do just like the wide tip on this, and it works especially for when I do basing. In all honesty, that's all I really use the dry brush for. But I do enjoy using it. Next then, I've got a large base brush. So this is where I get down my first layers of colour on my model. And again, I get a nice smooth amount of coverage with the wide tip here. So it leaves a good smooth finish on those first layers. Next then is the first of the narrow tip brush, and this is the Raphael size 2. So the lower the number, the finer the point on the brush. And I tend to use this on the secondary kind of layers, so things that are or require a bit more precision than the large base brush for blocking in colour. Next then I've got a size 1 Raphael Kolinsky Sable brush. So this is when you get into a little bit more of the detail, so blocking in colour on, say, accessories or in between armour joints, or maybe getting in the first edge highlights and things like that, so a little bit more detail work on here. And then lastly then I've got a Winsor & Newton Series 7 size 0, so I use this for all the fine detail work, so things like eye lenses or extreme edge highlights or any sort of thing that requires very precise detail. This is the brush of choice. And that's pretty much all my brushes. I do kind of use some older ones just to get some of the texture paint down on the bases, but other than that I exclusively use these brushes. So just remember, you don't need to spend a fortune, but you don't need to get a massive range of brushes either to do a load of different jobs. All these brushes are multi-use. You can use this one for shade, or you can use this one for dry brush. So, you know, it does come down to personal preference as well. So just remember that when you're choosing your brushes. So paper clips are super useful as well, and what I use them for is sub-assemblies mostly, and here is one I prepared earlier. So what I've done here is I've just bent out the paper clip to this sort of shape, so it's like an L shape, and what I do then is pick the component that I'm looking to paint, so it could be like an arm or a set of Space Marine legs, and I drill a hole then somewhere that you're not going to see it, so it could be the base of a Space Marine's foot or the inside of an arm joint, and then I glue it on the top bit here. And then for support, I Blu-Tac the long bit on the bottom to the top of a old paint pot, or you can clip it and kind of put it in a cork if you'd rather use corks, but corks are expensive, paint pots are free, kind of, you already paid for them. So then, yeah, it gives you an elevated place then to start of paint and manoeuvre, so a lot of room to get at all those detailed bits if you are painting in sub-assemblies. What I also use them for as well is to add support to characters or models that maybe are a little bit unstable on the base. So say, for example, you've got a running model and there's only one point of contact to the base, so say it's like 1 foot. What I do then is, instead of just gluing that foot down, I'll drill a hole, again insert the top bit of this paper clip, but then I'll clip it at about here, so just a little bit. And then I'll drill a hole in the base and glue, super glue that in. So what happens then, it adds a layer of stability to that model. If you do tend to, say, you know, drop your model or knock it by accident, then if it is just glued with just the foot on the base, it might snap off. Whereas if you've got the pin connecting two of them, it just gives it a little bit of extra support. What people also kind of use these for is, again, trimming them down, and say you've got heavy components when you build new models. So say you've got like a metal dragon or something with big wings, maybe it's like the Forge World Bloodthirster or something like that, and the wings are quite heavy, so you need to add that another layer of stability or support. Again, similar with the base, you can just drill a hole between the two components where the join is, so between say the wing and the body, insert a little bit of the paper clip in there, and then when you glue it, it just adds again another layer of support. I don't do that. I read up on it and seen other people do it, but I just thought I'd mention that as well. So that's what you can use paper clips for. So just like we mentioned, I use Blu-Tac to stick my models that have been prepared in sub-assemblies onto something like a paint pot, which is great to keep those nice and secure on there. What I also use it for is to pose models before gluing. So especially when I guess you're building sub-assemblies, you want to kind of get an idea of what the model looks like before you commit to gluing it, and it's a bit more difficult in the sub-assemblies because obviously the model's not built, the components are all separate, so unless you know what they will look like together, you could be in for a nasty shock after you finish painting and you're like, oh, that doesn't look great. So what I always do, especially when building in sub-assemblies, is I Blu-Tac the models together. So you put a little bit between the joins, so the arms or the torso and the legs, things like that. And it's not the best, it does tend to fall apart, but you do get a general idea of what the model's going to look like once it's glued. So yeah, useful. Can't think of anything else I use it for, but good to have. So a small pair of modeling clippers I think is pretty much essential for everyone. I don't think I need to speak too long about these. I think you all know what these are used for, and it's for unclipping your models from the sprue. And you want to make sure that the straight edge here is the edge that's facing the model as you're unclipping it. So that'll leave you the nice straight and clean cut, not the angled edge here, because that can sometimes damage the model itself and it won't leave you with a clean straight edge. What I tend to do though is I do leave a couple of millimeters between the model and the clippers when I clip, because sometimes if you do it right up flush to the model, that can leave you with a little bit of a rough edge, or sometimes a hole depending on what how the sprue is attached on the model itself, which you then have to fill with something like green stuff or whatever. Whereas if you leave a few millimeters clearance, you can come back to that with something like a scalpel or a file, and it doesn't leave you with that hole then, and it's just a bit easier to clean up. You can also use this for modelling conversions, so say if you want to replace a sword with something else but it's attached to a hand, you can just sort of unclip it at the hand, and then attach whatever you want on top of this. So really good for anything like conversion work or things like that where you just need to remove something. So fairly simple here. So here we've got a hand drill, really useful, especially if you collect 40k and you want to drill those gun barrels. That's the reason I bought this. I was fed up of looking at those gun barrels undrilled or trying to paint little black circles to make it look like they were hollowed out. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to spend a couple of quid on this little hand drill and drill those barrels out. And all you have to do is get a small enough bit in the top, and it came with a range of different sizes. Get your scalpel, make a little bit of a notch in there, and then kind of just, it's really hard to show without it being in something, but you kind of push down on this, it's all kind of spring activated, or you can use this bit here. I tend not to use that too much just because it's got too much of a chance maybe to slip out, and I have been stabbed by one of these, especially the smaller ones. They're really sharp and they do get under the skin, so I kind of just use the grip down here, hold it like that, and just kind of work that drill in to make the hole. Again, it comes with a load of different sizes, so it'll definitely be enough there for whatever really weapon you've got. What I also use it for, is, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is to set up my models for sub-assemblies, drilling holes in the feet so you can pin them to the base. So a lot of great uses for this little drill, more so than I thought when I initially bought it. So great tool. So here we have the Citadel mold line remover. It is a bit of a recent purchase. I've been mostly using a scalpel to clean the mold lines, but I thought I'd give this a go. Especially useful, you know, if you're a beginner, there is kind of an unwritten rule or rite of passage, I guess, for every beginner that has at least half an army built and painted, covered in mold lines before they realise that they shouldn't have mold lines. But I assure you that they should not have mold lines. Get one of these. before you even start building and painting. It is great to say I use the scalpel. That's still good for getting in kind of the tight or hard to reach places, but this is really good for getting rid of especially those long lines, the long mould lines on, say, the edge of a Space Marine's leg or something like that. It almost functions a similar way as like a ski or an edge on a pair of skis or a snowboard, where you want to run this down and making sure that the edge here catches the mold line as you run it down. So you want to have it at a certain angle, and I will kind of post a video on how best to do that. But it cleans then the entire mold line. You just keep running it back and forth until you get kind of the finish you want. But really handy, and it's so much quicker than using a scalpel, and especially when you use a scalpel, you do kind of like maybe nick the model as you go, depending on which edge you're using, and then you've got to clean that up. But this does it seamlessly. I think the only caveat with this is it doesn't get into those tight places, which you then have to use the scalpel for. But it is also great for cleaning things like, say, plasma gun coils. So sometimes you do get that really annoying mold line running right between the coils, and getting something like a scalpel, something like that, it is a pain to do it. Whereas this, you run this back and forth a couple of times, getting rid of that mold line has never been easier. So definitely wish I'd bought this sooner, and especially for you new guys, don't start off with a bad habit of letting your models retain those mold lines. Get this tool and get rid of them before you even start painting. So great stuff. So here we've got the scalpel, and this is a surgical scalpel. It is super, super sharp, and this is the exact type of blade and scalpel that is used in surgical theatres. So they are used to cut people open, and I have cut my thumb open on multiple occasions. My girlfriend works as a theatre nurse, and she assures me that these can go deep, deep, deep into the skin effortlessly. So a little bit of a disclaimer: if you are using a surgical scalpel, then make sure you are careful with it when you're removing the blades here and adding them back on and putting them on. You have to be super careful, because any sort of slip up, it'll cut you. Make sure you're using pliers to take them on and off. I made that mistake when I first got this scalpel. I was trying to get it on with my hand, and I almost cut myself open trying to get it on, until I was told, you know what, you should be using a set of pliers to get that on safely and securely. Comes with a variety of different blade attachments as well if you want to. I've just gone for a kind of standard blade as I get used to using it. I probably will suggest, if you are kind of starting out with the hobby, it might be worth using something like a craft knife first. For me, over time, that wasn't really making the cut. Yeah, I said that. So I upgraded to a surgical scalpel, and it will cut through anything with very minimum effort. If you're kind of cleaning your model up and you've unclipped it, you're doing some mold line work, or maybe it's a bit of conversion work, and you just need to cut a bit of the model off to replace it with something else, or anything like that, anything that involves cutting, basically. This will do the job, and it'll do it really well. But as I say, you just got to be a little careful with how you use it, and just make sure you don't stab yourself. So these are reverse needle nose tweezers, and when I say reverse, what I mean is when you apply pressure, it actually releases, and when you release, it actually grips. So these are really handy when it comes to, well, a lot of things really, especially when it comes to something like transfers, for example. When you've cut out your transfer, instead of trying to mess around with your fingers and trying to hold it in there, or maybe you've got traditional tweezers, which means you've got to keep that grip on the transfer while it's in the water, so you've got to wait for it. You can actually just grip with this, put it in the water, walk away for as long as is necessary, come back, and you're ready then to precisely apply the decal or the transfer. The other thing I use it for is for putting tufts of grass or any sort of foliage on a base. So say, for example, you've got a tuft of grass, you've put your PVA, or maybe it's got adhesive on it already, and you want to place it somewhere like between a marine's legs, which even at the best of times, and even if he likes you, is a very difficult task. But it is fiddly. It is a difficult place maybe to place it. You can just grip it with this. Again, no need to apply pressure. You don't need to hold on to it. You can then delicately and precisely place the tuft, maybe in a spot that's a little difficult to get to. So really, really handy. And you can pick them up again for really cheap on eBay. So these are jewelers reverse tweezers, and I think they were only like £2 or £3. You know, not much at all. But really worth getting, especially if you are applying things like decals or things like that. But they will grip and hold on to anything without you having to apply pressure. So if you've got a use for that, then these are a great tool to have. So this is green stuff. Moving on to a little bit more of the modelling side of things now. And again, this is something I wish I'd started using a little bit earlier than I did. In all honesty, I was a bit intimidated by using it. You know, you see all these magnificent creations from people using green stuff, but you forget that you can use it for the basics. And what I was sick of was seeing gaps in my models. So when you join, say, two halves of a torso together and you're left with that big ugly gap, when you spent all that time painting it and getting it all ready and finished, and then you're just left with that eyesore, it is a bit of a pain. So what I wanted to do was fill it, and all you need to do that is you get the green and the blue, a little bit of water, roll it together so it makes kind of like a dark green, and you can start filling it using the tools we're going to talk about in a minute. So I will do a bit more of a detailed video going through how to use green stuff. You don't need to buy the Citadel one. This costs £7 for a very small box. If you go online, like eBay again, or something like that, you could probably pick up a roll for it for the same price. So it is really handy to have. And even if you want to be more ambitious, you want to create some brand new stuff with it, maybe some accessories or new iconography, that is great for that as well. So all I can say is just pick up a little bit and just have a mess around with it. It is good to have. So you've picked up your roll of green stuff. You're probably going to need some sculpting tools as well. So here we have two different types. We've got the metal sculpting tools on the left, and we have the silicone tip brushes on the right, and they will have different purposes. Obviously, because one is silicone, one is metal. So if we're looking at the metal ones here now, if you're sculpting, so that's if you're creating something from new, or even if you're just trying to work that green stuff into a gap, something like that, you're going to need something rigid. The flexible ones are not going to be good for placing green stuff on the model and getting it in the shape that you want it to be. So what you're going to need is a set of these metal ones, and again, they're not that expensive. You can get them from eBay or hobby or crafting store. And say, for example, you want to create a bit of iconography, or maybe just, as I said, place it into a gap. You can take the pointy end here, which looks almost like a spear, and say you're carving out a bit of iconography, you can use almost like a pen just to scrape that away, get rid of the excess to get the shape you want. And really it's about utilising the tips in the way that's most effective. So this one's a little bit like a snake head, almost like a spoon. So say you're looking to carve out a little bit of a hole or something like that, you can use that to kind of scrape away or make that indentation, similar to the ones on here. So you've got, again, a different shape on this one, and this one's almost like a bit of a well. So if you are kind of wanting to create that well or that indentation, you kind of can just like rub away there. And I know it's not the same, seeing me use this on my fingers, so what I'll do is create another video showing how to best use these tools. And what you can also use them for is, at least what I use this one for, is to apply texture paint to your bases. So this is the Games Workshop texture paint, or even if you're using another brand or something like that, you can shovel it up with this. So I just put it in the pot, get a load of texture paint on that, plonk it on the base, and then use this end just to shape it and move it about. So it is good for that purpose as well. So the silicone brush is a little bit different, so they don't have the resistance or the rigidity of the metal ones, obviously, because they're silicone brushes. But what you can use for these is to refine and to smooth things out. So this is almost like the fine detail part of the work. So you've created, or say you've filled a gap with a load of green stuff, and you've got a bit of rough edges around where the green stuff meets the plastic. You know, you don't want to leave it like that. If you leave it dry, you can of course sand it down, but you want to try and minimize the amount of sanding or filing you want to do. And what you can do is use one of these brushes. So you just get a bit of water on there and you just kind of brush it on. You know, use it like you would a normal paintbrush, and you just keep working at those edges. And again, this will be covered in another video, until you smooth out and that green stuff is blended in with the rest of the plastic, making it for a nice smooth finish. So there we have it. These are the two different tools and their uses. So yeah, as I say, it's worth picking up a set of these. You can get them cheap on eBay or any sort of hobby stores. Don't, again, pay a lot of money. These come in a lot of different sizes, and you get different tips as well. So a very versatile tool to use, especially when using green stuff. So we are moving on to glue, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, and the majority of you know how to use glue, but for the new guys, this is Citadel plastic glue. You don't have to use Citadel again. You can go with another brand as long as it's kind of like plastic glue, and this is exclusively used for plastic models. So say you've got a plastic arm that you want to glue to a plastic torso, you can use this glue, and how it works is it fuses the two pieces together, and that allows for a strong bond. However, if it does spill over to another part of the model, it can cause that part of the model to melt and sometimes warp, which isn't great, so do use it sort of sparingly. It does give you some wiggle room as well, so once you put the glue on, you can kind of still adjust the model. I think it's for up to about 25 minutes from once the glue has been put on. So if you are looking to get that ideal positioning of a arm or the angle that you want the gun to be held at, you do have some time to apply the glue and adjust it to the position of your choice. So that is the plastic glue. Then we got just standard sort of super glue, so this is pretty cheap stuff. So this will work on things like metal and resin, and this will just create a very quick bond. What you can also do with super glue then is snap it off as well. So if you kind of glue it on, the bond will almost be instantaneous. So it'll glue in that position straight away. You can snap it off later, but it will leave a hard coat of residue for the most part around where you snapped it, which means if you are gluing it back on, you're more than likely going to have to glue it back in the same position as it was originally, unless you want to clean away some of that excess super glue. So it certainly has a use. Don't tend to use it that often, especially as we've moved away mostly from metal models, but it's still useful, especially when it comes to like things like resin, or if you're using to say pin a model to a base using paper clips or something like that. So that's pretty much the glue. And guys, we're almost at the end of this video, only a couple more things to go through, and what we've got here then is some sandpaper. You can use a file as well, but what I tend to use this for is to get rid of any kind of like texture or unwanted texture, or anything that I want to get smooth on a model, or maybe I'm just trying to get rid of the texture on the top of a Citadel base or Games Workshop base or something like that. Then I tend to use sandpaper. So what we've got here are different grains. So you've got 240, which is a bit coarser than the 600. The 600 is going to be a lot smoother. But with sandpaper as well, you've got the added benefit of wetting it, and that allows for a smoother finish. So you might use something like the 240 to get rid of the initial coarseness or roughness of on a model or something like that, and then you can maybe finish it up then with maybe 600, which is a little bit wet, to get that smooth finish. So really simple to use. You can also kind of roll it into different shapes, so if you're kind of wanting to get it into a quite a detailed area or a small sort of space, you can kind of like fold it over like that, so it's just nice and thin. Just cut that away, and you can maybe even tape it to something like this here. Just tape it in there, roll it around, and then you can kind of just use it almost like a file, so it is quite versatile there, whereas a file, you're going to have to buy different shapes and sizes and the rest of it. If you've got stuff lying around like, pens or pencils or, even tools like we've just shown here, then you can just wrap it around it and use it to get into all those kind of nooks and crannies on that model. So that's pretty much the sandpaper and what we use it for. So we'll move on to, I think, is the last item. Guys, I thought this was the last one, but actually we have one more thing to speak about, but we'll get through this first and we'll move on to that. So what we've got here is BioStrip 20. So if you've ever wondered, can I strip my plastic models without melting them into a pile of goop using things like spirits or acetone, then the answer is yeah, you can. You can use BioStrip 20, an all-purpose stripper. It's odor-free, it's non-toxic, it's pretty safe to use, it's tough, it's innovative, it is water-based. There's nothing really much to say about this other than it is just white paste, and what you'll do is I'll make a video detailing how to strip how to strip models, not how to strip. We're not going to go all Channing Tatum on you, don't you worry, but all you need to do is pretty much dunk your models into this about 2 to 3 times. Use a brush like this just to scrape away the paint as it blisters, any sort of the paint that gets into the recesses and all that'll get it all out, and your model is pretty much brand new. So when you think about the cost of this, which is only around about £10 or so, everything we spoke about in this video you can get fairly cheap for the most part. you know, it's not going to set you back when you consider the offset against, you know, brand new set of miniatures. You know, if you've made a mistake on, you know, a £20 apothecary or something like that, you know, you don't really want to spend £20 on buying another one, whereas you can just buy this, dunk it in there, and you know what, there's a lot left for a lot more stripping. I need to stop saying stripping. But that is that. And what we'll do is move on to the last thing, which I forgot to mention, and it's been here the entire time, and it's this cutting mat. So again, an essential part of the hobby. If you are using something like a scalpel, or even if you're just painting, get a mat or something like that. It'll protect your desk or your unit or whatever you're on. So I would thoroughly recommend getting a cutting mat. And guys, that is it. We have made it to the end of the video, so I'm really hoping that you've enjoyed today and that you maybe learned something. You know, if you are new, let me know if I've missed anything, or if you want anything in a little bit more detail. As I said, there's going to be some follow-up videos for some of the things we've discussed. But if you've liked it, please drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, leave a comment below, let me know how you're getting on, and I will see you for the next one. Take care.